Hi, I'm Andy Acton.
And I'm Chris Strevens.
This is Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. We just spoke to Paul Ebert, and he's still a relatively young man. And when he described his childhood, it's quite remarkable, isn't it? That, you know, it's in a modern European country, Germany. When he talked about his childhood in that village, it sounded like a bygone area, but I was also quite jealous. It sounded quite idyllic.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And it's not that long ago, because he is young. And you think, does that happen in our sort of small villages, or is that like a thing of the past? You know, is it now that everybody's just like on PlayStations and Xbox? It was fascinating. I love the. I mean, it's finance, isn't it? So it's hard to make it interesting, but he managed to.
He did, but also the link between him as a young man being curious, having ongoing curiosity, and then how that curiosity kind of fired him to then start a finance company and what Tabeo has come today. I think I can see quite a strong link between that young curiosity then going into finance and joining certain dots together that weren't joined before. And he's doing remarkable things.
I just think it's fascinating. You know, yet again, we've got another guest who's sort of pretty low key, really.
Yeah.
But he's actually stirring stuff up.
Yeah.
And you know, what was his motivation? But it's almost like one of those brilliant things. Well, I'll tell you what, I think we'll set up a finance scheme.
Yeah. Exactly.
You hear something and then you change something.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And I think for anyone listening to this one, you should tune in because there's a lovely story in there about Prince Harry, which you'll enjoy. But you have to listen to that one.
Definitely.
We have microphones in front of us. We have headphones on. It can only mean one thing.
We're doing a sports commentary.
We're
going to start singing.
It might be Dentology podcast.
Oh, sorry, Dentology, Looking forward to this, I tell you.
I am.
As always. Always good fun, isn't it, really?
It's funny, isn't it? We were talking just before we started recording about kind of what is it? What does it cover? And I think encompassing the business of dentistry is quite important, isn't it? Because if you think about the dentist holds the handpiece. But how many people and businesses and support functions need to exist for the dentist to do their thing?
Yeah, it's a bit like when cars, isn't it? You know, when they say, you know, they're going to lose 5,000 jobs in the cars, and then it's like there's also 40,000 other jobs that link to the cars, and it's a little micro culture, I think, of dentistry, like layers, like ogres.
Yes.
There we go. See.
So today we're very fortunate. Very fortunate indeed. We have Paul Ebert joining us, and Paul is the CEO and founder of Tabeo, the patient financing, patient plan and cards together all on one platform. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation.
That's catchy.
How you doing, Paul? You well?
That's a mouthful. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm really happy to be here, guys. Excited about this session.
If you'd have just stuck with patient financing, it would have been so much easier, but you had to get greedy, didn't you, and do more.
You have to do it like 5-pay car or something.
You know what? It's actually the opposite. So we would have loved to start with finance, but we realized there's so many greedy people around us that in order to get the dentist a good price, we just had to compete.
We will get to financing. But to start, I think we always take a view that there's clues from our childhood in terms of the people we've become. So can you look back on your childhood and give us a sense of what that looked like? And was there a time and a moment in your childhood that kind of put you on the path to the person that you are today?
So I grew up in Germany. And when I say Germany, it's probably the middle of the land. And then the closest city would probably be Frankfurt. So that's probably best known for its airport and its football team, Eintracht. But I grew up 50 kilometers outside of that. And not a town, but a village. So think of a village of 200 people, 100 houses, surrounded by little like hills and forest and a couple of fields. So that would be me growing up. And
how far do you have to get to school, Paul?
Yeah, exactly. So I think the first thing that teaches you independence is that by the age you're 3 or 4, you just sort of like walk down to the bus stop and you get to the public community transport service and you take your ride to the town where there would be the nursery or then the primary school. And that's what I did until I was 18. So that didn't really change. And I remember it's really interesting because I live now in London, so southwest London, around the Wandsworth Clapham area. the idea for me to imagine that my daughter at the same age of 3 would walk down the road and get onto the public bus and drive 4 or 5 kilometers like I would is not really on the radar.
I was going to say, did you do that on your own? You actually genuinely, it's not like your mum walked. You actually walked down to the bus stop.
Yeah, it was like 500-600 meters, but it was so safe. Wow. I mean, like, and obviously you would imagine that in winter when it's sort of like, you would do that at 8, so sometimes it would still be dark. But also, I think from age of 5 or 6 at the latest, that the way it would work, and I think this was for most of my school life, is like you come home, you've been served food or you cook for yourself then at one point once you're old enough, but you basically do your homework and you leave. So that was other thing that was really useful. For some reason, my parents managed to drill those sort of like necessary evils into me of just having to do my homework, and after that I was free. And so I would usually do my homework. The thing is,
Paul, but we only know our own environment. So I did in London all my life, so it sounds bizarre. But for you, that's your village, that's where your parents live, that's the environment you know. So it's just normal, isn't it? Yeah, it sounds extraordinary when you replay that story now, but I guess that was just normal life.
I totally think so. I mean, like there were a bunch of other kids, so it wasn't like I was the only one. I mean, like you would just all meet, or on the way down to the bus stop, you would basically pick up your friends. And then you walk together, and then you did the same. So it's literally, and I happen to be the last house in the village, so that would always be a thing. But in my street, there were already 5-6 other kids that I could go down to school with, and my brother would often go with me, so you don't end up being alone. So I think it helped a lot having an older brother, and so in my childhood, I don't think that too much pointed towards what I'm doing now, except maybe the day that I broke my upper front tooth during hockey, and the dentist didn't notice that the root was severed. And so what then happened is that she just put it on, and I got an inflammation, and then the infection eat through my top jaw. So I realized there's value in having a good dentist.
Nice.
And I ran around all my teenage life with this tooth being black or gray. So you can imagine I was supremely popular with the girls because of that sort of like cunning smile. I'd like to think that it was my smile that sort of like made that journey a bit harder on me than it needed to be, but I think it was probably more my character, that I'm just quite a provocative guy.
You tell me whatever story you need to, Paul.
I don't know, but look, I can tell
story
you
works for you
to be a grown-up.
Flip. So what did you used to do after school then in a small village? Was it sort of like you do your homework, then go and play in a field or something?
No, you'd play football. You'd ride a bike. You build a dam, sometimes to the disliking of the local farmer if you were a bit overly ambitious, so then you would flood their fields.
Excellent.
You would build tree houses. I think that would have, like if I divided my time between tree house, football and biking, as sort of like things that you can do locally in the village, that would probably be a quite fair split. And then in winter, you'd go ice skating because the lake would freeze over. You'd go sledge riding because we'd have 8 weeks of snow and ice in winter. That's no longer the case. But I really loved it, just being as independent and wild as a child can be. So I really enjoyed it. I like it.
It almost feels, and this isn't meant how it might sound, but like one of those idyllic Disney movies where the kids throwing snowballs and getting in front of the fire, then going ice. It sounds it's interesting because you're obviously not that old. Well, either that or you look really good. So this wasn't that many years ago, but this is a bit like an old British childhood. Does that make sense?
It always sounds kind of not quite a Victorian, but it's yesteryear in terms of how somebody of a similar age in England would have experienced.
I sort of think I'm obviously much older than Paul, but I sort of think to myself, we used to do our homework, then get on our bikes and disappear, and then you sort of come back, being like a homing pigeon, or your parents would come and find you. Whereas I think nowadays a lot of kids don't do that, do they?
But it's funny hearing your story, Paul. You say I don't think there was much that kind of influenced what I do now, but I'm hearing massive independence, massive free thinking, having to kind of find your own way,
teeth,
and find your own fun and enjoyment. So, like I say, I think there's probably quite a lot of the things in there that might not necessarily have stood out, but lots of people in different environments wouldn't have got that sort of exposure. So, how did you Did you find adjusting to city life quite straightforward, or was that quite challenging to start with? When you were, so what was your journey? So you left your village in Germany. Where did you then next?
Did you go to uni, I assume?
So that German story would have probably been late 80s, early 90s. So and then beginning 2000s, you would start to go towards the end of the school. So A-level equivalent was then early 2000s, university from 2004 to 2007. And I just followed my brother. So he was the taller, smarter version of me. And so I just figured, look, what's good for you can't be too bad for me. And so...
Where did you go to university, Paul?
I went to a university, surprisingly not far from home, but that was focused on business. Was called European Business School. I think it's now fallen from fame. Back then it was actually quite useful because we would... At the time... When I graduated, we would send more people into investment banking in London, Oxford, and Cambridge. So it was a really small university with 150 to 200 graduates per year, but 50 of us would start at Goldman to Credit Suisse. And so it was really funny. So we were the top recruiting school in Europe into investment banking, and it was similar to consulting. So it was a small school, really focused on business and heavily leaning on the consulting and investment banking boom. And so my brother got a job in London, and then I was still trying to figure out whether I want to graduate from university or enjoy my student life in Buenos Aires, because I spent some time abroad there. But then my parents cut the pocket money, and then it was going a bit harder in Buenos Aires. So I figured maybe I can have fun in London and have a job. And because this was pre-Lehman, anyone who wanted a job pretty much could get a job in banking. And so they gave me one, and then I followed my brother to London, and I loved London. I loved the big cities, because you don't have anything like this in Germany. If you think about Berlin nowadays, probably, but in the 2000s, really, Berlin was big then, but it wasn't as vibrant as London was at the time. London was really the capital of the world in terms of being international and fun. And
did you immediately adjust easily to that world? Because it just seems what you described as your childhood. I can see that it might be quite overwhelming coming to a city that has kind of 12 to 15 million people passing through it every day.
I think I had a great teacher in literature that made me curious about, so it was whatever, it was 14 to 18. I had the same teacher in literature. And he just made me curious in finding things out. And at the time, for me, it just seemed like, well, these are just people like you and me. They just happen to pursue this crazy vision of capitalism to the extreme. And so I thought that part is actually really interesting, because when you're on a trading floor in a London investment bank, you have these guys making crazy amounts of money and behaving like they did, well documented now. And that for a young person was really interesting. And
the Wolf of Wall Street.
No, seriously, it's really you could totally note some of those behaviors, maybe not quite. I think it's dramatized, I would call it, but that was just fun. So if you were a curious mind, this was great. And then it was just like you talk to really smart people. So the money attracted a lot of smart people as well. And so if you're a young person and you have the privilege to work with a lot of smart people, that's great. And they were very demanding, and that felt a bit like in sport. You just have to try your best and compete with the fellow bench people there, and that was all right. So I didn't feel it too strange, and I had my brother, so that was okay.
And they played hard, I'd imagine, so that was quite fun, isn't it, as well?
Oh yes, I would definitely say so. I managed to place my bonus on London club scene very quickly before even earning it, and I've really enjoyed it. It was great. And I think I once got even confused. I still don't know how and why. But I came out of a London club, and then they ushered me into the back of a limousine, and then the driver realized, you're not Harry. So they just saw like a ginger glow and just thought I was Prince Harry at the time. Clearly, excellent. And so that, I think, then once that happened, I was like, okay, I fucking love this city. I mean, it has to be a ginger and not a liability. So I'm like, this town is my game, So I think that was really brilliant.
This town welcomes gingers. I'm in.
Totally. So you're not being ostracized, for someone like me. This was a really nice break.
That's fabulous.
Great story. And then you're at Credit Suisse, but you were saying that your segue into dentistry we were talking before we started, and you credit Laurel Bowden from 83 North, the London-based venture capital firm, as kind of
that's
pointing
right.
you towards dentistry. What was the story behind that?
So I left the work or the jobs in investment banking in about 2013. So hung in there through Lehman crisis and then the Southern Europe debt crisis. That was good. But I realized maybe this is not going to grow anymore. And, judging where Credit Suisse went 10 years later, I probably had a good
wise move.
foresight on where things might go and whether they had a management problem on really sorting out legacy stuff. And I always wanted to do an MBA. And then I went to a place outside Paris and Singapore at INSEAD. And there I met so many interesting people that were so courageous in what they did that I figured, you know what, maybe I can do something other than corporate. And so I came out of that year deciding that I want to go into something where there's higher growth or where I might be more in charge. And and I joined Rocket Internet in Berlin for a startup clone of Funding Circle. Really loved working with owner-led businesses. Then I went to a restructuring, and it turned out that restructurings are terrible because you're really unpopular if you're the guy making people let go. Surprise. And I decided I want to stay in startups. And so when I was thinking, maybe I want to be a, chief financial officer, chief commercial officer in a startup, it turned out that these guys just wouldn't give me the job. And then I was talking to the founders, and I thought, like, you know what, you're actually not much smarter than me. You probably even have less experience than me. And you probably understand regulation.
My sense is that you are too similar. You would have been a challenge for somebody like that. Yeah.
And so, okay, if they don't give me the job that I want, then I figured I don't have a mortgage. I don't have children at the time, so I might as well give it a go and try something myself. And so I was just poking around. So my wife bought me Nike running shoes in Brazil that she could split over installments right there in the card reader. And I was just sort of like, what? Interest-free on the card reader? Why doesn't it happen in Europe? And then, then I said, like, okay, well, 50% of people in South America, Mexico, Israel, they all pay in installments, interest-free. And so it's like the dominant payment method. And so I was
when you're in the store to buy your trainers, you tap your card, but that's only the first payment, and then the other payments are scheduled to come out over a period of time.
Yeah. And so for me, it was mind-blowing. And I said, like, how does this work? And then my wife said, well, when MasterCard and Visa card arrived to Brazil, we already were using forward-dated checks. So the way of paying in installments was already embedded even before there were credit cards. And I was like, wow. And then she said, then they obviously built a shared network, an IT system, where the card reading machine can talk to the card issuer's system as well and could figure out, do you have available balance, and could adjust it. And so I realized in that moment, well, if it's so easy to get credit and if it's no cost to pay in installments, then no wonder adoption should go up. And then I looked at problems and obstacles why this doesn't happen in Europe. And at the time there was Hitachi and V12. And those were the players. Shawbrook was backing some others. But in Europe, and the UK was the avant-garde of the world. I mean, the Americans hadn't even discovered this idea. So the British already had it because they liked credit cards. In continental Europe, it wasn't really there. Retail finance. And then I looked at how the process works, and I was like, oh gosh, this looks like as if I go to a bank branch and fill out a manual paper form. And so for me, it was the idea then, well, maybe I can bring a Zopa-like process, very simple thing to retail finance and make it easier, remove the paper stuff that the practices had to do. Yeah. And Laurel pointed me towards healthcare. So Laurel from 83 North, I thought I'm going to go into home improvement. And she said, like, look, these people are going to go bust all the time. and when you do retail finance,
probably true.
It's actually... You won't have a problem with home improvement with the consumers because they're homeowners. So they're probably as good credit as it gets. But the people that will cause trouble are that the tradesmen don't do the same quality of work that they promised. And then you have a consumer that probably wants to not pay. And then when you go after the vendor, so that like the tradesman, then suddenly the tradesman isn't there anymore. And so then you make more losses on the side of the business that's providing the service or the good than you actually make on the consumer side. And so she said in healthcare, this shouldn't be the case. And that's how I then sort of like being pointed in the direction of healthcare, and then dentists were on the high street, so you could walk in, and that's how the journey started. So it was just seeing things in Brazil, thinking, would people use it in the UK, and is there strong competition? And the competition was sublime. I mean, I managed to speak to the COOs, so the people running the day-to-day of the business of most of our competitors, and they were so blissfully confident that they would share all their problems with me. So for us, one of the things that we wanted to do, you could just write them down in a case study, because they would tell you what are the problems where they think their business could be automated, but they never really were bothered to invest in technology because it wasn't needed. And so I was like, this is really cool, because they already tell me what you can automate and where there will be value for the operations to automate it, and where the consumer and practice would find it really attractive. And so all I did was listening to people already in the business and copying what people were doing somewhere else, making it easy and more straightforward, I suppose, in digital.
I'm intrigued, Paul, why the payment systems in Brazil were designed in a way where you can tap and schedule that. And is it the wealth of the population? Is it that they are more accustomed to pay for relatively low value items in that style? I mean, we've now got Klarna. I guess you can kind of get credit on Klarna for lots of relatively low value items. But that system of scheduling across a credit card hasn't hit the UK. Is there a place for it over here, or are we just not designed like that as a society?
So when you look at Brazil, and that's probably there are a couple of other countries out there, but I think Brazil is in the fintech world is quite well recognized as an innovation leader. You got Nubank there now, and in Brazil, the population is very keen to adopt things that are innovative, making payments more secure or lower cost, or making things more accessible for them. And that's because it's a country that is largely developing country, and where crime rates are high. So if you told someone it's better to pay by cards because you don't get mugged at the street corner as a street vendor, that person will probably adopt a card.
Right.
And so that really is a powerful impetus for then banks in that market to invest in technology. Because if technology is better for consumers and makes their system safer, faster, cheaper, then there is a real nice return on investment. If you look at Europe, we still have bank branches. And in Germany, my parents still go and fill out the transfer forms nowadays, whereas here in England, people would use their online banking app. And so
it's very interesting. It's driven by personal safety, isn't it? That sounds like personal safety is a big part of it.
Personal benefit is a key driver. And then you have only 4 or 5 banks that had a large enough and underpenetrated market so that they didn't see so much benefit of buying other banks. So when you look at the UK or even the US or Europe, many banks are groups of different divisions in different countries, banks brought together and kind of tied up. But it doesn't mean that the IT is tied up. And so if you then try to roll out any IT change over these countries and different divisions, it's really, really hard. And that is now multiplied, because today when you think of the Visa and MasterCard network, God, how many banks do we have in Europe? 5,000. In the US, a couple of thousands as well. So if you want to standardize something as a Visa or MasterCard for a payment network, you need to do all that. And I just always said, look, Royal Bank of Scotland sold WorldPay. HSBC, I think, got rid of First Data. And so the major trend in the late 2000s in Europe was to get rid of card acquiring services as a bank. It was better to be spun off as an independent business. And these are big businesses themselves still, the acquiring. In Europe, you'd find that most of the big payments providers, and there's even a category of payments providers, are these old acquiring companies like Ingenio, and whatnot. And so in Brazil, you don't have those. It's basically the acquirers are the banks as well as the issuers.
Just the banking system.
And so I think that part really means I don't think we'll have the same environment in Europe or the US for a long time. And Klarna is kind of one of the first banks built in that ethos in Europe, because they're a bank. They issue their cards, even if they work with technology providers, but it's fundamentally their cards, and they do the credit. So they're similar in that direction. And in the US, I think the first real innovator in credit card would have been Capital One. So Capital One was the first one in the 90s, really shaking it up with better pricing and a different model of doing things. And they were extremely successful in doing that. And then on the back of that, because in the US you had so much competition, Amex, Citi, JP Morgan, Bank of America, all of these big players have developed a really good game of credit cards. So in the US, I think one of the challenges for the adoption of retail finance is that credit cards are just so popular. And in Europe, they're much less popular or much less being used. I mean, the credit lines as credit lines. In the UK, a little bit, but most people in the UK don't use credit cards in the way that Americans use credit cards.
That's interesting, isn't it? Actually? I suppose, yeah. If you use a credit card, you don't need a finance facility. You got it on your credit card, don't you?
For me, what's good to hear is I guess you get caught in your own little local world, and when you travel to another country, you still adopt your preferred payment system. So you go away, you still use your card, but you don't necessarily get caught within that environment as somebody that's living within their structure, which is quite interesting. So it was literally this situation in Buenos Aires that sparked this idea.
Brazil would have been Brazil in Sao Paulo in 2014. Yeah,
right. So and that was the thing that sparked the idea of I wonder if, and then obviously the connection pointing you in the direction of dentistry, and that's what put you on this path to create Tabeo.
And then what I loved about dentists is that they're owner-led businesses. So it's, yes, there's some private equity groups buying it up, but that's really nice way because you have a way of regulating the market with the GDC as a kind of the first layer, right? Then you need to be qualified as a dentist to be even admitted to the GDC. So there are high barriers of entry. And that means then that the level of professionalism in that community of business owners is more homogeneous and tends to be quite high. Yeah. Doesn't mean that there could be some, but the standards are quite high. And if you then throw in this thing of private equity consolidators, it also means that if you do things in a certain more standardized way, either technology or process-wise, and you can document it, then you can sell your business. And what this created, I think, is not to be underestimated, is a really healthy environment where business owners have an exit option, because many small business owners never have the option to sell their business. Yeah. What this did is it really meant that closing your business and shutting it down came at a very high opportunity cost. So if something went wrong, you're just throwing things away and not fixing the patient. First, clinically, you probably don't want to do this, but financially, there was also a strong disincentive to doing that. And this is why we probably have a finest dental happening as a really rare exception compared to home improvement, to illustrate why we started to like dentistry. And then dentists, relative to, let's say, vets or opticians, are not as consolidated. So the consolidation in the veterinary and optical market is massively advanced.
Much greater.
It's really huge. In optical and hearing aid, it's like 80%. Top 5, top 6 change. In veterinary, you're probably 50, 60% in the consolidation. And at the time when we launched in dentistry, it was like 10, 20%. And it was that point that I realized if we can manage to sell and sign people up for our service, probably not many other startups would go after this niche because it's quite hard selling to dentists if you're Klarna. And then as a Klarna, you're probably more interested in signing an agreement with Nike, frequent low tickets of a big brand that can go global, and you start in the UK, but then you expand to different countries with that same brand. What's their game of going after dentists or primary care more generally, or healthcare services? And so when we realized this, we're like, okay, so we learned to sell. Our competitors that are the big innovators are probably not going to go into our sector because they do think it requires a specialist, and they also don't know how to distribute. So risk management and distribution was a tricky part for them in dentistry. And then we felt, okay, is this market big enough? And it's really fascinating when we when we set out to do finance and dentistry, I think the market had an annual volume of 50 or 60 million. And the incumbents thought, this is never going to grow. This is never going to go anywhere. It's never going to be more than X what runs to dental practices. And fast forward, I'd reckon you have almost 500 million happening in dentistry nowadays in finance per annum across the different providers. So they were wrong by a factor of 8 to 10. And that was really exciting to realize they really didn't see it. So even our competition that was already there didn't feel like there was a merit of worrying about Tabeo, because they thought, well, they're going to default. No one else is going to give them money. But then we were cursed to bootstrap for most part. So we raised a little bit money from angels, but ultimately we bootstrapped. And that drove efficiency. And then from the first 100 vendors, so the first 100 practices that we acquired in 2018, we got so many referrals because they liked our product. They didn't see the other practice down the road, like 2 miles down, as a competition, because it was a local catchment area. And therefore, it would be good to just share with them, hey, here's this new tool. Why don't you use it? And we loved that. I think for 3 years, 60-70% of our registrations were driven by word of mouth, because we had a good service, we had a good product, and that made scaling, or growing market share, quite effective. And funny enough, I think one of the big wins for us was to discover Invisalign's Doctor Finder, because we realized, what if you look at dentists who are a bit more innovative? And back in 1819, the diamond, gold, or platinum providers of Invisalign were still quite rare. But these unicorns were also interesting because they were a strong indicator of probably well-run business that is really keen about growing private, and for whom because of the product and the patients that it serves, they probably need finance more than others. And so we started going after those. And that was great. And then they started referring us to their friends in the next town. It was also a top provider. And in doing so, we just now have grown to, I reckon this year we'll end up with 6,500 dental practices that have signed up. So we keep adding to this. We don't have My Dentist yet. We don't have Bupa yet. We don't have Portman. So I hope eventually I'll win them, and then we'll have 8,000. But I'm forever grateful that this theme of that we're an innovative brand that does finance refreshingly different and simpler, most importantly, sticks. And it keeps giving to us. It keeps us honest as well. But
definitely. You were saying, Paul, about you described dentistry. It's regulated. You've got a professional body, professional people. Qualified to a high degree, sort of intelligent people who are nice to work with. And I guess that transcends across all of healthcare, which is your market, not just dentistry. Are there differences in dentistry and how they approach finance, integrate finance into their business compared to some other healthcare providers? Are they quite front foot and advanced compared to others, or are there things that we can learn from other sectors?
Well, they're a bit behind.
Yeah. This week's episode is brought to you in partnership with Ultimate Dental Business. We know as guys who have supported dentists for over 25 years, and through hosting this podcast, that building business skills in dentistry is vital. Time and again, we hear from dentists who tell us that they find the business side of dentistry the most challenging. And we know that stress and pressure comes from doing things we don't feel well equipped to do. That is why we are delighted to be part of Ultimate Dental Business, the new dental business hub delivering top-tier business training for dentists. Founded by Dr. Brad Thornton and Dr. Krupal Shah, Ultimate Dental Business is a response to the lack of robust dental business education currently available. Through our effective collective discussions with dentists, it was clear they most needed good structure and effective guidance to give them the knowledge and tools to be successful dental business owners, and to create a business that serves them rather than the business that takes all their time and energy to keep going. To find out more about developing your own business education, click on the link in the show notes or go to ultimatedentalbusiness.com.
So when I think of healthcare, I'd say that our focus is exclusively on primary care. And primary care is GP, pharmacy, dentist, vet, optician, audiologist. And the interesting thing about primary care is that you can just walk in. You don't need a referral from the GP, right? I mean, the GP goes without saying, but the dentist serves a local community and you can walk in. And the fascinating part is that dentists, unlike any of their peers in primary care, serve an extremely wide span or range of prices. So you can get your checkup done for 60 to 100 quid, or you can get, implants placed for in the thousands.
Yeah.
And as a result, if you combine this with the fact that they serve a local community, they accept a multitude of payment options. But it's very fortunate that apart from NHS, insurance is almost not present. So one of the reasons why dentists adopt finance more than vets, because they would be quite similar so far, is that there is no health insurance for teeth, whereas there is a health insurance for pets. So if I was to describe the obstacles that we faced in veterinary, it would be that the number one way to finance or pay for bigger treatments would be pet insurance. And then there's also the convenient option. It sounds horrible, but if someone really can't afford the pet, then it's just put to sleep, and that costs very little money. In dentistry, the option is to just pull your teeth and it's done. This having to kill an animal if you can't treat it because you have to put it out of pain is one of the top burnout reasons in veterinary, and I find it horrible. But ultimately, it's the pet parent making a decision, or owner in this case, that it just doesn't work out for them, and so then that's where it ends. But in dentistry, because it's your own teeth, you kind of that food keeps on giving to you if you're doing it, and so dentists will eventually sell you the implant if you don't need it now. Maybe 5 years later, you had a thick of it, and eventually you do it.
Yeah,
I'm interested, Paul, in what you mentioned pharmacy. What things do people finance in pharmacy?
Nothing, and that's exactly what we
right. There we go.
So we decided not to do GPs because they're too small tickets. Pharmacy, the fanciest thing you'd find there is whatever an expensive vaccination
toothbrush or something.
Or something like that. So that's why in there everyone accepts
cool, right,
cards.
okay.
And then they have the NHS processing part. So if you look at pharmacy payments, it's cards and NHS billing. That's what it does. And in the GP, it's it's possibly 95% NHS billing. But in veterinary and in optical and in dentistry, the self-pay part is really big. And
the audiology bit's quite big as well. I've seen.
Yeah.
And those new hearing aids, only because one of my friends has got them, are really expensive.
They're not cheap.
So hearing aids could be a big one, but I think the challenge that you have there is also that you want to, if you were to see adoption across hearing aids in a similar scale to dentistry, then you will face the challenge that the majority of shops are now owned by corporates.
Right.
And so driving change doesn't necessarily benefit so hard, even in this kind of joint venture models that, the different brands will do. It's much harder getting people to do things. And because they've made a lot of money, then making them suddenly make some more money by introducing a higher cost payment method isn't so straightforward. Right. Whereas in dentistry, it's literally the owner deciding, I want it. And then the independent dentist will set the benchmark for the groups.
Right.
And I think the only group of note, what is the only group? But a big group that has flipped this around over the years since we've been running is my dentist. So my dentist, I think, is now one of the leaders when it comes to implementing technology and payment methods. And they're really championing that phenomenally well. And this is looking from afar, so we're not working with them. But what we see is they're implementing things in a similar way of how we see successful independent practices implementing things. With the challenge that it won't work in every practice of my dentist, but they're generally speaking quite successful in that. But independent owners in our mind are the best partners for business in dentistry, just because they have the decision power, they have the team, and they see it through, and the whole team has ownership. Often when dentists have built their business, it's a really cool team, like a football team, that's been playing together. They might not look like the strongest team on the pitch for numbers, but together they're like,
quite
they really
powerful.
have it.
It's a powerful
and
force.
it's really joyful to work with them.
To make good decisions when lending money, you need data. And I guess a modern day financing business like yours relies very heavily on the data that's produced. Is there any opportunity for dental practices to benefit and improve their own performance based on some of the data you're collecting? Is that something that is purely just beneficial for you as a finance company, or is there something at some point that could be reversed back into the profession?
So if you look at the UK population, and that might be in the US, it's, I think, quite similar, and probably Germany, those are the three big markets that come to my mind. You have good credit bureau data. And therefore, the credit bureau data will be the dominant factor in making a credit decision. You then have an overlay of certain regulation. For example, the FCA insists for now about 7 or 8 years that affordability is very important. And that could mean that you check what someone's income is, or it could mean that you check what their income is and then calculate whether you think they can afford the monthly payments for the installment plan put forward. So in the US, I don't think you have that requirement. So you don't have affordability as you have it in the UK. And in Germany, I don't think you have it either. And so
That's interesting.
and as a consequence, you would think that most dental practices just have a mix of demographic and credit scores that depends on where they are based. So, and then you can just look at the distribution of credit scores around the country. So if you think of a dentist offering finance in Blackpool, probably makes a lot of sense because it's a lower income area. But the problem is that that dentist will probably have a lower approval rate than the dentist on Harley Street, purely because the Harley Street itself is a bit unique because it gets so much catchment area. So if I was to say the dentist in Bournemouth, they probably have a higher approval rate than the dental practice in Blackpool. So it's more a function of where you are, and whether it's an affluent area or not, because all things equal, income and higher average age for the treatment will result in a better credit score.
Yeah.
And when I look at approval rates, I'd clearly love 100%, right? So I'd love 100% approval rate because it would make so much sense to offer something and knowing that the patient is always going to be accepted. This has been, I think, moving a little bit up and down, but right now, probably 70 to 80% approval rate is where most practices can operate.
Right.
It means the same of the wider average across the market. And we think that there's a set of practices that are very focused on private and know their customers well. They will even extend credit when their financing partner will decline it. So let's say you pay $1,500 up front for your Invisalign, and then you pay $500 when you get the aligners, $1,000 after 3 months, and another $1,000 or whatever, as and when. And sometimes this is even a substitute. So for example, if you think of orthodontists have always just taken installments because you come every 4 weeks to tighten those wires and brackets. And then it makes perfect sense to be spreading the costs over time, because why would you charge someone up front if you go and see them every 4 to 6 weeks? And I think implants and Invisalign increased the need for finance in the market because you suddenly didn't see people as much anymore, and it was a big enough market that everybody wanted to share from. And they realized not everybody can pay. So whether data can really help you learn something, my short answer would be no. And you totally have to work with an outside party, because if you don't, it's just a huge effort. I mean, for us to integrate with 2 different data credit bureaus is really simple. But for us to also get the money up front, so that the benefit of good credit score data is probably that if you scale, so if you become big enough, you can get your own funding, and then you have a track record. And so one thing that we have certainly done for the trade, because we're the only show in town that has its own funding line of the scale of what we have. And that is de facto an indication that Dentistry UK, that's how far I would go. Private Dentistry UK has now its own access to capital markets by virtue of Tabeo, because when we go for refinancing, we'll get 20 people wanting to do the funding, and maybe 5 or 6 people will be joining the queue, handing us a term sheet. So similar to dentists wanting to sell. And that's because people see, it's a very granular book, 2 to 4,000 to 5,000 pound loans. They have relatively short terms. People perform, people behave, people repay. And then you have investors that say, I want a slice of that, whether that is Secure Trust, who's doing this through V12, or whether Novuna, formerly Hitachi, does that with a little bit, but they all did that as part of a bigger play. Tabeo is
That's a
the
really
only one that's
positive. That's a
exclusive
really
dentist.
positive story for dentistry, isn't it? The fact that you're the provider, but the fact that there's people sitting behind you who see dentistry as being a market they want to deploy their capital in.
Especially after the finest dental disaster.
Yes.
But that's the thing. It's I think the really important thing is to understand what were the unique factors about Finest Dental, and to understand how can you underwrite a practice. So trying to understand, is the owner going to behave in a certain way? How can you avoid concentration risk? And in our case, right, we worked with Smile Direct Club, and we worked with them to the last day. And I think we saw it coming maybe 15, 18 months before it went bust. So we started having serious conversations with them in December 2022. So a year before they actually started to shut down the UK operations. And so they were our biggest client. And naturally, if someone brings you the biggest risk, you want to be most close to them and understanding how it works. Helped that they were a public company, so hence they produced data more frequently. It helped that they had a very cloud-based operations, so they could share case-level data. And so we've now processed 10,000 complaints, and but we had a full copy of the CRM data to basically respond. So, and if you came to us and said, I'm not happy with my aligner treatment from Smile Direct Club, then we'd be able to look up, right, this is your email. I can see you in the database. I can see you've completed your case is 12 months before the default. And then we'd say, sorry, Andy, we can't give you a refund because you actually completed it, or you're no longer covered by the guarantee. And so I think
And I bet there would have been a lot of people trying that line
trying to
because
get
they
out
thought,
of it,
well, there might be a way that I could get my money back here.
Why wouldn't you? Because if a lender doesn't have the data, then the UK regulation begs you to actually take them to the FOSS. And so in my mind, if the way I view risk in dentistry, I'd say on average, you will lose probably twice as much on the practice providing the service going out of business than you would lose on the consumer piece. And that's why I think for us, the stability of the market, so making dentists more profitable, making more revenue per site so they can cover more fixed costs, making them more focused on private so they can attract more dentists. So making them more successful and thriving businesses is one of the best defenses that Tabeo can run.
It reduces your risk.
That we will do is where we find someone that we think we're worried, we even, when they come to us, we'll even call the current provider and tell them you might want to drop them. Because we would be worried that because if Hitachi or Vuna or Secure Trust suddenly would incur a big loss like Finest Dental again, that feeds back.
Affects the market, doesn't it?
It's bad
the confidence,
it's bad for everybody. That ripple in the pond, those concentric circles go out.
Calling out foul apples is really important. You have to pick people where you think there's something off, and therefore it's really important that also dentists on each other check, and they basically say like, "Hey, what's going on there?" They remain curious, like how can someone build an exceptionally big business? So you had the TDE, the dental experts.
Yeah.
So this was actually the ex Finest Dental crew, and they set up on Harley Street, and they did exactly the same spiel. It was phenomenal, and then there's certain tools of how you can surface that. So my team onboarded them. Somehow they had managed to kind of optimize the thing, but then even when you're onboarded, you're not on the platform, and so our triggers just within 2 weeks said, have a look at this guy because they're on track to become a really big dental practice in terms of finance origination. And then we looked at them, called some of their clients and realized, oh, so this is the ex-Finest Dental crew, just with a couple of different names, because we found a practice manager and everything, so we had records for that. We talked to the clients. The clients are waiting to see and having delays in treatment starts, just like Finest Dental, and we're like, let's shut them down. And it was really funny because about 9 months after we shut them down, we got a call from Stripe, our partner for card payments. Yeah. And they said, hey, guys, we see that you have the dental experts on your system as vendor. Please make sure that you shut them down. And we're like, oh, yeah, we did that long ago.
We beat you to it.
It shows you how card providers as well as, and it could be WorldPay, Barclaycard, anyone would have been there, or other finance providers. They just don't track closely individual practices, and so we will review on a weekly basis anyone that looks like an outlier, and it can be a single practice somewhere in, I don't know, North Scotland or South England, and we'll pick it up and we'll try to make sure that this doesn't become a problem. And you always want to see, is there anything systematic about it that you can learn? But flagging this means you basically avoid losses like Finest Dental.
But I love the idea of that, because it keeps the profession as an ecosystem in good shape. Because like you say, we know that whenever there's a problem and whenever a high profile practice struggles or goes bust or potentially is in trouble, it's obviously devastating for the business owner, but that does ripple out through dentistry. So I love the fact that from a financing point of view, you're kind of trying to get these people, and actually it does protect them and their patients immediately, but it also protects the wider profession as well, which is a very smart thing.
It also reinforces that actually, at the end, especially with the Finest Dental thing, it wasn't dentistry that caused the problem.
No, this was just entirely an individual.
Yeah,
and this is what you have to
yeah.
realize. When you have owners, we think the best thing you can do is underwriting the owner, not the business, because the business changes over time, a bit like with the market. But what you can figure out is if the owner has a certain way. And,
that's right. I think so. I think so.
Paul, you're obviously a smart guy, and the way you've knitted this business together by looking at other things that are out there is incredibly interesting. What's the key thing you've taken from your entrepreneurial journey? From the boy in the village in Germany to running a very fintech-led business in dentistry. What's the thing that's really stood out for you?
Gingers are okay.
Yeah. You've passed as Prince Harry. That was the overriding thing.
So I think for me, it will be my team, because we wouldn't have onboarded 6,500 dental practices and processed. I think we'll have processed now. Last month, we processed £1 billion worth of applications since starting. Right. So it's like you wouldn't do this if you didn't have it on the technology side. Yeah. But also you wouldn't have gotten there if your sales team didn't acquire people. Yeah. And so for me, it's you got to nail your process on how you sell and know exactly who you want to target as well. Because in dentistry, we only have half the market. But I'd argue we wouldn't be that dominant if we targeted the wrong half. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. And we were very clear on what we are, which was a finance company. And the reason why we now would do cards and plans is because we think that gives us a competitive edge in finance, and that we can probably do those type of payment methods in a similar way, much more user-friendly than a non-dental expert or provider could do. And so the specialization is a really important differentiator, both from a risk management, but also product delivery perspective. So, and if I draw a reference to a dentist, if you're great in Invisalign, you're probably not going to be great at implants. And so we just say we stay in dentistry, we do payments, and that's probably what we can do well. And finance was just one thing that was very easy to adopt for practices, and we noticed that. So what would be the trigger that makes someone switch providers? And if the way to think about it is finance drives highly profitable private specialist treatments, but it accounts for maybe 1% of your patient transactions that you do. So switching that out is a really small cog to switch, but it drives a big wheel of profitability for the associate as well as the owner and the health of the overall business. And so figuring that small thing out, I think made all the difference. And we were just, I think, the first one to really understand this and then able to implement a process around it. And then we just iterated and iterated. So it wasn't that we had this one big insight and then could capitalize on it. I think it was team keep listening and then keeping on it. Yeah.
So, and that's kind of that sort of that 1% marginal gains, isn't it?
It's like evolution, isn't it? Keep evolving.
Keep looking at those little improvements.
Yeah. So that was, I think, for me, the key insights. And it came with a sacrifice that we wouldn't be the next Klarna. But that's okay. If you as a person don't need to be the next Klarna. I find the idea of being as public as Sebastian really scary. Because like coming from my background, what would my friends think about me if I go back and they would see me on the news or thinking about how much money I would make? Like, my worst nightmare is that my friends back home realize that I'm building a successful business that might one day, hand me a nice payoff. I don't know when, but or that I build something big, because I don't want them to think of me differently.
Yeah.
When I go and drinking a pub of beer, whether I have money or not. Like, but frankly, the opposite is true, that they ideally that they don't care about this, but they just, you just have a laugh and you talk about kids or you moan about the football match, but don't talk about money is something for me that's really important. Paradoxically, I work in finance, right? But But personally,
I think it helps keep you grounded. I think it helps keep you grounded, doesn't it? And away from work, you like nature documentaries, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Is that your guilty pleasure? Is that how you relax?
At work now, yes, I will totally watch whatever the resident fox or birds, magpies or whatever is floating around in our small garden. I'll check that, or the squirrels. But I love when I have the window open and the geese from the local pond fly by, or some of the parakeets that we have here in London. That is definitely my go-to place, and I just feel good. And that's, I guess, most people, if they were to go to a forest and just stand there, they would get relaxed because it's good for us. And then, having grown up in a village, it probably will per default be whether that's a visual stimulation on TV or it's a audio stimulation from a bird passing. For me, that's definitely my go-to place that I like best. And I just think evolution in animals is so unique because they don't have as big brains mostly.
Yeah.
And so it's much harder for them to actually learn. So if they don't learn, they die.
Yeah.
And so I find that quite fascinating, then how certain animal species last so long. So I find that evolutionary part, the very scientific part about nature, so fascinating, that there can be so many different versions and different things work differently. That to me for nature is what I love, that it can be super diverse, but there is not this crazy intellectual superpower that allows one species to suddenly dominate. We're actually the only ones. The humans are the only species that basically dominates the others. And so I think nature is a beautiful place.
That's great. Paul, we've got to the stage where we need to ask you 2 questions.
Dun, dun, dun.
The first question we have for you is, you're a fly on the wall. Where would you be and who would be there?
I think, because I quite like golf, I'd actually like to be a fly that sits on, right now, probably Rory McIlroy's back or his shoulder shirt, and just, realizing what the guy's thinking and how his pulse is going while he's trying to win another golf tournament. That's probably what I would like most. So apart from nature, golf is probably my second thing to go to. So if I could be as a fly sitting there with the big players, that would probably be my thing, because I wanted to become a golf professional.
Really?
When I was 18, I was between do I become a golf professional, or do I go and study? And so I think that never.
You still play from scratch, do you? On a good day,
15, 16 out of the 18 holes, yes, and then I play handicap 54 on the 3 other holes.
I need to get Paul roped in for the charity golf day next year. I'll be sending you an email.
Yeah. I think golf's one of those fascinating games where it looks so easy, yet it's the consistency is phenomenally hard. And then you see people like Rory McIlroy. Wasn't it in the US Open when he missed that putt? That was
he's been missing a fair few. But for me, it's Tiger Woods that changed the game. So if you think about Tiger Woods, what he would do different, and in my local golf club, there wasn't a golf pro that would work by this. And so I found myself basically reading this book from Butch Harmon, the coach when Tiger went big. And I would literally go into our rain cover box, which had mirrors all around because we didn't have cameras back then in the 90s. And I would basically just repeat every step according to the pictures and track myself and just find myself 3-4 hours in that box, hitting range ball after range ball and obsessing about those incremental changes. And then even if the ball flies, if it didn't feel right, just like, the golf balls, you'd be upset. Yeah. And, but it was that I think is I love that about golf. You play against yourself.
Yes.
If something goes really wrong, it's not the weather, it's not the competition. It's basically you not getting your nerves together.
Yeah.
And you then missing that small putt. So that's the other beauty. You can make a great golf shot if, coming back to Rory, if you don't sink the putt on a meter or two when it matters.
Yeah.
See you next week, buddy. So I quite like that about golf. Yeah. That it really boils down to 1 or 2 strokes around the golf course to win a tournament.
Yeah.
And our last question for you before we let you go is, if you could meet somebody, you can sit down and have a coffee, a glass of wine, a beer. Who would you like to meet, given the chance?
See, I had in my head, I thought who we might go for, but maybe
so I have to say it's 2 people I'd probably go for, and it's for very different reasons. So one would be David Attenborough.
That was who I had in my head. I should have written it down. I
When you said it, I was like 100% he'll get that one. No, because he's just like exceptional what he's gone through. And there's a really good documentary out there.
He's a national treasure, isn't he?
He is.
And the second one would be Angela Merkel, because she came from Eastern Germany, and she, for me, is one of the reasons why I think I'm, to the extent you can be proud being from a particular country, I'm proud because Merkel was just such a successful leader. And yes, there's been some problems, but she's been phenomenal in, stirring Europe through the Euro crisis, setting like Wir schaffen das in August 2015 when we opened the border towards refugees from wherever they came from. And that for me is just something I'm like, she's lived through an interesting time, coming down the wall, 90s, 2000s, and then looking ahead. I'd love to meet her one day. I think I never will, but I think
it would be interesting to know her take on what's happening at the moment in Germany, wouldn't it?
Yes.
That I think the Russia in Ukraine and general now with AfD, so the right wing parties coming up. But that's the thing. I think she would probably have perspective as well on where it gotten wrong, on a much more fundamental level. If that makes sense. Not so much knowing the things, but having the bigger picture of what's going on.
Not minutiae, more of a helicopter view. Yeah.
And but Merkel and Attenborough, that would be the 2 people I'd love to meet.
Brilliant. Cheers, Paul. I've really enjoyed the last time we met. I was blown away by the quality of the conversation, and you've surpassed yourself again today. It's been brilliant. It's been brilliant.
It's flattery, but I take it.
Keep well, and hopefully we'll see you at an event or somewhere on the dental scene sometime soon.
Yeah, cheers, Paul. Thanks very much. That's very good. Thanks, man.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.